Hello everyone, dear friends. Thank you so much for your views. We're already 17 people, and every new subscription is a huge kick in the butt for me to come up with new stories. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe to my channel. It's very important to me. 5 friends, Max, Igor, Sasha, Dima, and Oleg, set off on a hike into the forest, which, as they thought, wasn't as scary as the locals had described. But the deeper they ventured into the thicket, the quieter it became around them. The forest was dense and grim. The trees, like living beings, loomed over the path, twisted and covered in strange, almost artificial bark. They appeared as black shadows, growing not upwards, but inwards, piercing the sky. The branches intertwined, creating dark arches through which no light could penetrate. The air was thick with moisture and dampness. Even the wind, when it occasionally blew, sounded strange, as though it itself were unsure and afraid to break the silence. The farther they went into the forest, the quieter it became. The forest seemed to absorb their footsteps, stealing every sound. First, the birds chirping and the rustling of leaves disappeared. Then even the sound of their own breathing faded, leaving only a dull sense of confusion, as though they themselves had become part of the forest. It was unnervingly quiet. "Do you hear that?" Oleg suddenly broke the silence. He always liked talking about strange things that others preferred not to think about. He paused for a moment, looking around. "I feel like someone is watching us." His words didn't reassure the others. The sky was darkening. There was a heaviness in the air, like a forewarning of rain. Suddenly, a few drops hit their faces, and in that moment, Igor felt a strange premonition. This was not just rain. Each drop felt like a warning, something ominous. It was as though the forest was pulling them deeper, like an invisible force entwining their souls, taking away their last shred of safety. A few hours later, they found a cave. It was a strange place, as if hidden from the world. The entrance was unusually wide, and the cave itself had an unnaturally dark aura. It exhaled the same heavy, threatening atmosphere as the forest. It swallowed the light, and none of their torches could disperse the gloom. But it was already late, and they were tired. The decision to seek shelter seemed reasonable. "Maybe we can at least make a fire," said Sasha, but his voice sounded hollow. Everything around them was too quiet, too bleak. Inside the cave, it was as dark as hell itself. It seemed as though time didn't exist here, and the walls compressed, like a living prison. The dark stones felt soft, like clay, and the walls themselves seemed to breathe, shifting with each step. Even the fire they lit at the entrance couldn't chase away the eerie darkness. Max, always calm and composed, suddenly felt something was wrong. He stopped and looked around. "I think I'm starting to understand. We're not alone," he said quietly, and his words seemed to hang heavily in the air. Then Oleg, who was always prone to fantasizing, suggested they venture deeper into the cave. His eyes sparkled, not sure if from fear or curiosity. "I think there's something here," he said, barely containing his excitement. Igor and Dima immediately disagreed, stating that it was a bad idea, that they had no idea what awaited them ahead. Sasha also began to feel anxious, but couldn't explain why he was being drawn further into the cave's darkness, despite everything that had happened. Returning to the forest seemed just as dangerous as delving into the dark. When they fell asleep, unease never left them. But worst of all was the feeling that something was happening around them, something too strange and unnatural. Igor woke up first. Strange rustling sounds were coming from the darkness, and suddenly he felt something crawling on his body. He looked down and saw tiny spiders crawling slowly over his sleeping bag. But these weren't ordinary spiders. Their eyes glowed with dark fire, and each of their steps reverberated in Igor's heart with the vibrations of dreadful fear. He tried to stand, but he was paralyzed. The fear was so intense that he couldn't even move. His body felt alien, and his mind was consumed by darkness. When the others woke up in the morning, Max was gone. His sleeping bag was torn, and the stones around were covered in cobwebs. This wasn't ordinary cobwebs. They seemed to move, pulsing like a living organism. The stones looked like part of that web. Around them were strange footprints, unlike human ones. They led deeper into the cave, to its darkest soul. These tracks didn't seem real. They changed, as if everything in the cave was distorted, as if the darkness itself were alive. Sasha, gripped by fear, noticed it first. He felt his hair stand on end. These tracks were clearly not from Max. Something older and more sinister was moving through the cave, like a living thing. This creature knew they would be searching for Max, and it was already watching them. The friends decided to go further, but with each step, their anxiety grew. The stones underfoot became slippery and wet, and the air grew thicker and heavier, as though invisible forces, imperceptible to the eye, but tangible to the soul, were hiding within it. They walked, holding their breath, each step echoing in their minds. With each step, it felt like they were walking not through a cave, but through a living, breathing entity that didn't want to let them go. And then they saw a faint glow in the dark abyss. It beckoned them, like a light at the end of a tunnel. But it wasn't human light. It was dark, magical fire that made their hearts tighten. As they approached, a chilling wave of fear overtook them. The creature, sitting among a pile of bones, was something truly horrifying. It wasn't just a huge creature with spider-like legs. Its body was covered in scales, and its head, strange and distorted, was that of a baby, constantly turning as though it had no neck. Its small eyes, full of ominous awareness, watched them carefully, and words seemed to move on its lips, words they couldn't decipher, but which seemed like human babble. This was no mere nightmare. The creature could read their thoughts. It knew their names. Max was hanging in the web. His body was contorted in terror, and his eyes saw nothing anymore. The friends stood frozen, paralyzed with fear. The sensation that their very souls were being pulled into the light became unbearable. The creature wasn't just terrifying. It was the thing that distorts reality. It lived here, in this place, in this forest. It watched every movement they made, and it knew they wouldn't escape. Oleg tried to hold back his panic, but his legs moved forward, as though melded into the earth. The creature, noticing their movement, made a rasping sound, like laughter. But it wasn't laughter. It was something that couldn't be called laughter. It was like a cold prediction that they wouldn't leave this place alive. Max was already dead, and each of them knew it. The creature hadn't consumed him whole. It had taken his mind, and now it knew they were its next prey. The friends ran. They heard the creature following them, like a shadow sliding along the cave walls. Each of their steps echoed in the cave like the loud strike of a hammer. The creature was close. Its legs brushed their backs but couldn't reach them. But every time they turned, it left traces of its presence, as if it were part of this world. The campfire was no longer burning, and the cave swallowed their cries, choking them with its walls. In the final moment, they burst into the light toward the exit. The light of the morning sun illuminated their frightened faces. The creature froze in the cave's shadow, not daring to come outside. It didn't flee or disappear. It only hid, watching them from the darkness. Its pale baby head slowly tilted to the side, and a faint, barely audible laugh escaped its mouth, as though it had remembered their faces and knew they would return. It stared at them with its cold, knowing eyes. Then, it slowly retreated back into the darkness. The guys didn't stop. They ran, never slowing down, until they made it out of the forest. When they returned to the city, no one took their story seriously. Max was reported to the police, but he was never found. And years later, as Igor passed by old newspaper clippings, he came across an article. 3 more tourists had disappeared in the same forest. Their tent had been found at the entrance to an unknown cave. Inside, cobwebs, brown stains, and deep darkness. The creature was still waiting for new guests.